Hi everyone, and welcome to Raising Vibrations with myself, Simon. Today I'm going to be bringing you guys the introduction video to a series that I'm going to be doing called Pluto and its symbolic representation in the astrology chart. And so the reason as to why I'm actually going to be bringing this up and creating a video series on this is because a lot of information out there relative to Pluto and its symbolic representation in the astrology chart is, in my terms, a little bit sort of like mediumly understood. There's more to the symbol and what it represents that you can actually get from the astrology chart in itself. And sort of like what I would like to do with this video series is kind of uncover some of the more deeper and more sort of like exploratory dynamics that are associated with the symbol in itself. And my main purpose, of course, is to create awareness, is to raise the frequency in which we can actually understand this, and also to add an extra dimension to the relationship that we have with Pluto. And so this is for a lot of astrologers out there, and for anybody else that's interested in understanding this own symbolic sort of symbol within their chart. Okay, now the first thing I'd like to do to get this kicked off, and for everybody to obviously get into a space which they can sort of acknowledge the information and language that I'm going to be using, the first thing you need to do is, if you do not have access to your astrology chart, go over to a website called astrodeentest.com. So just type in www.astro.com and it will bring up a site. If you don't have an account with them, create one. If you do, then just log in and get your astrology details there. If you do not, then just put in the details that they are requesting, and then you can draw your chart. I would suggest using the house system called Porphyry. It is my personal choice, of course, only because of the way in which I work with astrology. Of course, there are other methods as well. But the main sort of thing over there is to get your astrology chart. Once you have got it, then take the next step in listening to the type of information that I'm going to be sharing with you over here. And that can sort of link into how and what we're going to be doing when we look at your astrology chart, so that you can uncover these own dynamics within your own self. Okay. So once you've got that, then we can see the location of your chart, and then you can actually skip ahead to whichever house or whichever symbol that Pluto's in, and then you can sort of like have access to that information. Okay, so that's that. And again, just sort of like grounding us in some of the principles and ideas of what I'm going to be sharing with this video. So when it comes to Pluto, the perspective, the dimension, the outlook, the point of view in which I'm coming from is adding in or including the dimension of the soul, adding in the perspective of the human condition, and then relating that symbol Pluto to that relationship. In other words, that Pluto represents the soul. And every single dynamic, every single function, every single behavior pattern that is illustrated through your life on the most unconscious level will relate to Pluto as the symbol. Okay, so what I mean by that is that the symbol Pluto, wherever it is in your chart, will correlate specifically to where your soul's evolutionary desires are placed. So for instance, if you have Pluto in the, let's say, house of Aries, okay, the first house, for instance, what we're looking at here is the archetype of Aries, in other words, how Aries operates, and then we attach to it the dynamics or ways in which Pluto works. We merge them together and we actually get the nature of the bottom line of how your soul is actually functioning in this lifetime, like how it is actually attracting to itself all the situations and sort of experiences into its existence, into your life, and so that you can then understand the nature of what is happening in your life and sort of transmute your psychology. In other words, change it from one way of being to another. Does that make sense? I hope I haven't covered sort of a lot of perspectives over there. I'm going to try and ground this over here for anybody that might feel that it's not clear. When we take the sign Pluto and we give it the representation of the soul, and then we link it to a sign that it's in, so for instance Aries, then what we do is we put Aries and Pluto together, the two dynamics, and then from that perspective we get the bottom line of how your actual life is attracting to it evolutionary circumstances, things that will put you in situations where you'll be forced to make choices, and these choices will correlate to new roads that you will take within your life that will lead you to spiritual developments, lead you to evolution in itself. Okay, so how does this actually work? How does Pluto work in itself? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ground us a little bit in the functions of Pluto, its specific archetype in itself. Okay, so Pluto, the soul, will relate to one very, very specific archetype, or one specific dynamic. That is the nature of desire. Okay. And within every single human being, we have this polarity within us. Okay. And this polarity is we desire something that is outside of ourselves. Okay. In other words, I go out and I desire to own a new car, for instance. Okay. And it is my process of attracting that into my life that will be then the search or the exact experience of bringing it into my life. That is how I'm getting that desire. Now, fundamentally, within the nature of desire, there is this polarity where we desire to search for something that is essentially outside of ourselves, that can be taken away from us. And we call this a separating desire. Okay. And then what we can do is we could actually then relate to the other side, which is a returning desire. Now, the returning desire is something that is defined like this: complete and utter total self-awareness. Okay. So the two are existing in reality like this. So Pluto in your astrology chart will represent on the most bottom line the nature of how you go about actualizing your desires. Okay. How you draw them into your life. Now, where evolution will take place is where in that moment of the desire, you are essentially making the choice to either search for something that is outside of yourself. Okay. And then by doing that, understanding that once you have achieved it, it is exhausted because its expectancy, in other words, the experience of the desire then dissolves. It's like, okay, yeah, I've got this desire, but then you realize and recognize that it is just something that is outside of yourself. It doesn't stick, it dissipates. And then you start searching for new things. Okay. Within your life, you start desiring new things. You just start desiring other things. Okay. Whereas in that moment, if you choose to return to yourself, in other words, to reflect back in on yourself, then you start to become aware of self-awareness, which is in an essence, the spiritual understanding, the spiritual teaching, the definition, the very definition of creation in itself. In other words, to understand who you are, okay, within the totality of creation, within the totality of your life, okay, and for that self-awareness, for that exploration, as it were. Okay. So the nature of desire is intrinsically attached to Pluto, and it reflects this behavior pattern in this dual way where we search for something outside of ourselves, we accomplish the desire, or we get the desire, we find out that it is just a separating desire, it gets removed from us, it's something that just is, that it has an ending, or we choose to reflect back in on ourselves to understand more of who we are and what we are in our decisions. Okay. The second way that I can explain this to deepen our understanding is how this nature of desire works. In a sense, we can sit at our home, for instance, on the couch, and we get a text from a friend saying, hey, would you like to come over to my house? So now what we have is posed with a choice. Okay. We can choose to then go to the friend's house, okay, and hang out over there, or we could choose to stay at home. Now, inherently within that choice is the duality, where if we choose to desire to actually go to the friend's house, then it means that we are desiring that, and that at the same time we are not desiring what it is that we are not going to be doing. So in other words, I'm not desiring to stay at home, for instance. Okay, you get that sort of like duality, that understanding. So that kind of like grounds a little bit more about the nature of how we go about making our choices, how they are intrinsically attached to desire, and then through that model, how it is attached to Pluto, and how Pluto in itself will reflect back to you, okay, the nature of how you are attracting things into your life relative to desire, relative to choice. Does that make sense? Okay, so I hope that's clear enough in that say. So what we're going to do is that when we look at now the symbol Pluto and we look at desire, okay, we attach another layer to this aspect, okay? And this layer reflects the idea of reincarnation in some way. And it also reflects to us the nature of the past and how we as human beings have this dynamic. Unconscious emotional security, okay? Right. So unconscious emotional security will correlate specifically to an attachment that we have to something that has already been explored or experienced. That experience within our consciousness is experienced, and therefore when we reflect back on it, it is something that is known, and it gives us a sense of security. And so when we have that attachment to that sense of security on an unconscious level, it is an empowerment, okay? Because it makes us feel secure. So when we're looking at Pluto, for instance, Pluto will represent the unconscious emotional security and attachments that are reflected in the astrology chart, in your astrology chart. It will then, through that process, then define how you will navigate back or to that specific area of your life. Okay, because on an unconscious level, it is an empowerment process. So Pluto actually relates to the empowerment journey, like how it is that you actually go about your life, empowering yourself by feeling the relationship, the duality between not feeling empowered and being empowered. Okay, is that clear? So now, if we take desire and we take what we've just learned right now about the nature of empowerment, or to feel empowered, then we can easily see how it is that we always search for something when we are unconscious of our Pluto signature. We always gravitate towards the house or the sign that Pluto is in on an unconscious level, because our soul recognizes a security pattern associated with that empowers ourselves, because nobody wants to feel insecure. Nobody wants to feel vulnerable, right? Okay. So as we now have understood that the empowerment journey will then relate to emotional security, which will then relate us to making the desires based on what empowers ourselves. Pluto in itself, then through that teaching, through that understanding, okay, will always, on most circumstances, in fact 99% of the time, allow us to make separating desires that are outside of ourselves, that do not allow us to include evolutionary understanding, which is to actually look in the opposite direction and to feel that uncomfortableness, to feel that sense of unknown, to feel empowered or empowered, okay? That is the returning to source. That is the actual returning desire, okay? The desire to not separate from source, but to actually return to source. So how does that work? Like, how do I make this clearer? Well, simply, when it is that you start to explore something that is unknown, you are disempowering yourself, firstly, by acknowledging the fact that you are not complete, okay? And that there is a myriad of things to explore within the world, okay? And understanding that relationship. And then secondly, taking the steps into actually going to switching your consciousness around and seeing it as that if you include the self-awareness, in other words, if you look at the returning desire, in other words, if you have a look at what's in front of you that is unknown, you can actually empower yourself by exploring those areas and adding to what is already gathered from the point of Pluto and what is secure. So when you are separating yourself from Pluto, in other words, you are feeling comfortable in your security patterns, you're not actually growing, which means that you'll recreate karmic dynamics associated with your astrology or with your soul's pattern and stay in the same place. So the returning to source, the becoming more self-aware, the exploration of your spirituality, the exploration of the self, will relate specifically then to the returning desire, which is to look in front of you and go, hey, by the way, this is an area that I haven't learned about. It does feel uncomfortable because obviously I'm feeling insecure about it. I don't know what it's about, but hey, I'm going to jump into it and I'm going to confront it so that I can learn more about something, that I can osmose with it, and I can then attach myself to the experience and empower myself by something that is now known and attached to what I already have. And so therefore growth and expansion takes place. Okay. So I hope I was sort of like clear on that construct of Pluto in itself. And that is the sort of bottom line association with Pluto and how it will relate itself to you as a human being on the psychological level, on the unconscious level. And when I say unconscious, I only refer to it as something that is unknown until it is made known. And this is again the reason as to why I'm making this video, because the moment that we start to become aware of it, all of a sudden we're empowered because we know exactly which route to go. Does that make sense? So with this type of consciousness, with this type of thinking, imagine how you could actually start to include aspects within your reality to unlock the infinite potential that already exists within your consciousness, within your life, and then obviously access deeper parts of your own psyche and allow for your spirituality to develop and speed up and process forward. Okay? So this is my little introduction video into Pluto in itself. I'm going to now be starting with the Pluto through the signs for everybody that is obviously interested in understanding how this is working for you. And what I'll be doing is sort of covering some very basic archetypes that are associated with Pluto through the house. Now, when it comes to Pluto and when it comes to the astrology that I work with, what I'm representing to you right now is only kind of like scratching the surface of the myriad of ways in which this can actually express itself. So if you're interested in understanding how this is working for you specifically, then come over to my website, simonforster.com, after this video and book a reading with myself. I do all my readings over Skype, and all my prices are available on my site. And as you can look over there, at this moment in time, I'm actually doing $70 for readings. And this is specific because of the Grand Cross that has just taken place. And obviously I'm accessing some deeper perspectives on your soul's evolution during this period of time. So again, like I said, come over to my website and book a reading with myself, or send me an email in terms of how you're being curious about this, and let's connect. And so we can actually understand more about how this is working for you specifically. Okay, fantastic, guys. Thanks very much for listening. Please hit the like and subscribe button if you've enjoyed my content. Of course, that's always appreciated. And share the information if you found it important and impactful. And to all my subscribers and to new subscribers, thank you so much for watching my content. I truly appreciate every single one of you guys. And until then, guys, thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.